Shalom. This week we are reading the Torah portion of Ki Tavo, 7th Parsha in the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. Over the past few weeks, we've mentioned the serendipitous synchronicity of the confluence of the Torah portions that are read during this highly significant and spiritually charged month of Elul. Significant and Elul-oriented, not only on account of their names, but on account of their themes. There was Shoftim, about appointing guards and judges at your gates, which we interpreted to mean also at the portals of your consciousness. Ki Tetzei, when you go out against your enemy, your own evil inclination included. And now, Ki Tavo, when you come into the land, when you achieve your goal. Well, just as we always read next week's Torah portion of Nitzavim, beginning with the words, "You are all standing here today," the week before Rosh Hashanah, so too we always invariably read Parashat Ki Tavo this week, that is 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. One reason for this is because our Parsha of Ki Tavo features the difficult and somewhat disconcerting section referred to as the admonition, curses. We don't want to start the new year on a negative note, so we make sure not to read it right before Rosh Hashanah. That would be inauspicious. So what's that really all about? Well, skipping over, just for a few moments, the beautiful and joyful beginning of our Parsha, which we'll talk about soon, one of the overwhelming and predominant features of this week's Torah portion begins to unfold in chapter 27. Moshe instructs the people of Israel of what they are to do on the very day that they cross the Jordan and enter into the land. He instructs the people that on that day they are to renew their commitment and their covenant with Hashem with a special ceremony. They shall travel all the way to the area of Shechem, where they will set up great stones on Mount Elul, plaster them, and inscribe them with the words of Torah. He instructs them that on that day, half the people shall stand on Mount Elul, half on Mount Gerizim, while the Levites and the Ark of the Covenant shall stand in the valley in between. And the Levites shall declare that there shall be a curse upon those who commit certain transgressions, and all the people shall respond, Amen. And we are also told, in 14 succinct verses, of the blessings that shall come to pass for fulfilling the divine commandments. And then we are told, from verse 15 through verse 68, the admonition for disobedience, these curses, for lack of a better word. You know what? I'm not reading these verses aloud. They're difficult verses, and I'm not going to try and put a positive spin on these verses. Some do, and I'm sure it can be done. They could even be sugar-coated by a real professional. But neither myself nor anyone has to make apologies for Hashem or for His Torah. We all know that everything is from Hashem, and everything is ultimately for our good. Unless, of course, these things are not from Hashem, but are simply the consequences of our own actions that we bring upon ourselves. But regardless, they are most certainly very difficult to read. And you don't have to feel guilty if when you read them you want to stop, or if they make you kind of sad to read. The truth is, in these verses, there's a lot of morose, of melancholy, of sadness here. And more than the physical afflictions, there's a terrible feeling of sadness, of eternal existential angst, unsolvable, relentless. Sadness that befalls a Jew, frankly, who rejects Hashem precisely because he's living his life without acknowledgement of Hashem. And open up your heart in the deepest way. As everyone knows, the most amazing thing about all these harsh verses of admonition and punishment is the only one actually, that explains why all this is befalling us. And it could be a big surprise, because it doesn't lay the blame or fault with any lack of scrupulous observance or insufficient piety in attendance to observing the commandments. Rather, verse 27 of chapter 47 instructs us that all this befalls you, and I quote, because you did not serve Hashem your God amid gladness and goodness of heart, when everything was abundant. Or as we are wont to read it, knowing that everything that you had was abundance, was exactly what you were supposed to have. But the point is, this whole cosmic darkness of disconnect described in these verses seems to be completely on account of a lack of joy in serving Hashem, meaning in living, because living is how we serve Hashem, and lack of acknowledgement. In studying this parasha, I'm thinking to myself, man, how was it for Moshe to have to give this over? How did he feel, Moshe, about having to communicate these warnings and curses to his beloved people? He's not going with them into the land, and he's clearly concerned about their future. And in these Torah portions, he warns them over and over that when they enter the land, they had better not, he warns them not to forget Hashem and not to succumb to the twin temptations, I say twin because they're really one and the same thing, of arrogance and idolatry. And now he has to say these really horrible things. And I know the love that he has for his people, that he's feeling for his people. You know, Moshe was always so sensitive to Israel's needs, but he knew them so well. And now, looking into the future, into their future, he's understandably concerned. But you know that Moshe was called the man of God, but as our sages teach, he was only called that by Hashem himself because he stood in defense of Israel. From his very beginning, from the time that he slew that Egyptian, he stood as the defender of Israel. You know what? He only lived for Israel, and he was constantly prepared to die for them. Back at the incident of the golden calf, when Hashem's anger caused him to want to destroy the nation altogether and start a new nation from Moshe himself, it was Moshe who said something, who was prepared for something that no one ever expressed before or since. He said in Exodus 32:32, "And now, if you would but forgive their sin, and if not, erase me now from your book that you have written." And it was as a result of this untoward episode of the golden calf that Hashem taught Moshe how to pray and activate his 13 attributes of mercy. Why am I so fixated on understanding how it must have been for Moshe to give over these admonitions? Because, open up your heart in the deepest way, you know what about Moshe? Maybe you don't know, maybe you didn't learn this. Our sages teach us that when Moshe prayed for Israel, he didn't just pray for his people that Hashem should forgive them, and he didn't just insist, but that, and I quote the statement, Moshe grabbed onto the Holy One, blessed be he, like a man who grabs his friend by the garment, and he said, "Master of the universe, I'm not letting you go until you forgive them." Now, we began today to start talking about the Parsha in the middle section of the admonitions, and that's one of its most difficult points. One of the most difficult points in the whole Torah, really. But actually, the secret of this whole thing is in the beginning of this week's Parsha of Ki Tavo. And we begin to read verse 1, "And it will be, when you come into the land which Hashem your God gives you for an inheritance, and you possess it and settle it, that you shall take of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you will bring from your land that Hashem your God is giving you, and you shall put them in a basket and go to the place which Hashem your God will choose to have his name dwell there. And you shall come to the Kohen who will be serving in those days and say to him, I declare this day to Hashem your God that I have come to the land which Hashem swore to our forefathers to give us. And the Kohen will take the basket from your hand, laying it before the altar of Hashem your God." Ironically, this very Parsha, with its intensely dark admonitions which Torah warns us will be visited upon us for not serving Hashem in joy and gratitude, this very Parsha begins with an expression of the experience of unparalleled joy and gratitude. The Parsha begins with the words, "V'haya ki tavo," and it shall be, v'haya, when you come into it, when you enter. And as the holy Or HaChaim explains, v'haya is always an expression of joy, and the joy alluded to here is the incomparable joy of living in the land of Israel. Ki Tavo begins with a beautiful vision. Moshe looking into his people's future, at how they'll be coming up to the holy temple, bringing their bikurim, their first fruits, the first fruits of the harvest of the land of Israel. This is a special mitzvah, special commandment which pertains exclusively to the 7 species for which the land of Israel is praised, based on the verses that we find in Parshat Ekev, Deuteronomy chapter 8. For Hashem your God is bringing you to a good land, a land with streams of water, of springs, and underground water coming forth in valley and mountain, a land of wheat, barley, grape, fig, and pomegranate, a land of oil olives and date honey. The commandment, as it's described in the sources of Jewish tradition, calls for the Jewish farmer to literally distinguish the first of the fruits of his fields to ripen by marking them with a band, with a ribbon, and declaring, these are the first fruits. The season of the first fruits is from the festival of Shavuot until Sukkot. The first fruits are placed in a basket and brought up to Jerusalem, to the holy temple, the place that Hashem your God will choose to make his name rest there. The Mishnah, in Tractate Bikurim, describes the immense and intense joy and unity of the Jewish people as they converge throughout the land and form caravans going up to Jerusalem with their first fruits. You know, the beginning of Parshat Ve'etchanan, we learned together that Moshe longed to enter into the land of Israel just to see the holy temple. Remember? He wants to see this goodly mountain and the Lebanon, an allusion to the holy temple. Well, that wasn't just anecdotal. The bringing of the first fruits to the location of the altar of the holy temple, where Adam Harishon, where the first man was created, and prostrating oneself before God and reciting a prayer of thanks, this is the very height of holy temple consciousness, the epitome of the joy of living mindfully, living for Hashem, ever mindful and in recognition of Hashem bringing me to each point, point by point in my life. And this mindfulness, Israel's gift to the world, mindful living. And forgetting this connection, letting it cloud over, becoming obscure, beginning to doubt if Hashem is real, if he really has been bringing me point by point to every point in my life, if my relationship with him is real. That's the true meaning of verse 47, because you did not serve Hashem with joy and a full heart from an abundance of everything. But where would that snap, that disconnect, where would it come from? Now open up your heart in the deepest way. The truth is, there are great secrets being revealed here. The truth is that this parsha begins before it began. Begins at the conclusion of last week's Torah portion of Ki Tavo, where the divine commandment of Hashem to destroy Amalek. The spirit of Amalek is the source of the disconnect from Hashem, diametric opposite of holy temple consciousness and bringing bikurim, first fruits, to the holy temple. In fact, it's the diametric opposition of humanity, of the human experience of being alive as a creation of Hashem. Because Amalek seeks to make us forget God's presence in the world. The holy temple reminds us that this is God's world, and Amalek declares there is no God. Amalek separates itself and seeks to separate all creation from the source of life. You know, this mitzvah, this commandment to destroy Amalek, it's strange. Israel has suffered from many enemies and oppressors throughout the world, throughout the years. But only regarding Amalek are we commanded in Hashem's name to enact total and utter divine vengeance and destruction. Why? Because Amalek's singularity emanates from the highest level of hating Israel. It's for no reason, and no logic, and no explanation. Amalek's total and all-encompassing hatred of Israel is the reason for God's total declaration of war against him. As Ecclesiastes states in chapter 7, verse 14, the opposite of this did Hashem create, this opposite that. Amalek seeks to blot out Hashem's name from creation. Thus we find in Exodus chapter 17 and verse 6, for the hand is on the throne of God. Hashem maintains a war against Amalek from generation to generation. Thus Hashem declares, only when this evil, in all its incarnations and forms, all its seed, is destroyed, will the throne be complete, and the name of God complete, ushering in the perfected phase of this world, as it says in Zechariah 14, when God and his name are one. At the conclusion of Bilam's prophecy in Parshat Balak in the book of Bamidbar, he referred to Amalek as first among the nations. He saw Amalek and declaimed his parable and said, Amalek is the first among nations, but its end will be eternal destruction. Numbers 24:20. What does that mean? Amalek is the first of the nations? That's a first. First for what? First at what? Destruction and evil? And on the simple level of meaning, Rashi explains that Amalek was the first to attack Israel. It took a lot of, I don't know what, to attack Israel for no reason in the desert. Rashi says Amalek was the first of the nations. He came before all of them to make war against Israel. And so the Targum renders, and his fate shall be to perish by their hand, as it says, you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek. But on a deeper level, the fact that the Torah calls Amalek first of the nations, signifies that there is something exceptional, a certain firstness about them, an aspect of firstness. Well, there is more than one beginning. There is, for example, the fear of God, which is called by the Torah in Psalms 111, verse 10, the beginning of knowledge. There's the Bikurim, the first of the fruits. The opposite of that firstness is Amalek, first of arrogance, the firstness of brazenness, of disbelief, of doubt, of violence, of chaos. Jeremiah states, chapter 2, Israel is holy to Hashem, the first of his crop. All who devour it will be held guilty. Evil shall come upon them, the word of Hashem. And as God instructed Moshe to say to Pharaoh, Israel is my firstborn son. So here's the truth. Being a Jew is a full-time job. It means being ever mindful, recognizing with irrational inner faith and connecting with the divine power that runs the world. It means acknowledging that Hashem's power fills the world, that there is divine providence over each person. It means never to give in to the dark forces of this world, never to despair, but to clutch to Hashem, to hang on to him like Moshe was hanging on to him like a garment, and to his Torah. And all this is the opposite of Amalekite consciousness. Amalek is the lowest point in the realm of evil, and it thrives wherever there is weakness of faith. So the verse states in Deuteronomy 25:18, he happened upon you along the way, which is based on the Hebrew asher korcha baderech. And those words, asher korcha, which happened upon you, is often interpreted in the root of the word kufresh, an aspect of coldness. He cooled you off. He injected you with coldness. Amalek cools off the heart. How? You might be familiar with this. He makes us feel foolish for getting excited about God. Amalek makes you feel that being in this world is not a reason to be excited. Why should you just get excited about your first fruit? It's just fruit. Don't be so serious about this world. You don't see God in this world. This Amalek-induced headspace gives way to doubt, to suspicion, to evaluations, to lots of use of the word maybe and perhaps. And it raises its head even at the greatest of times, even when a person has full cognizance of Hashem's light that's shining on him. Just then Amalek also positions himself along the way. And stubbornly, with his own brand of stiff-neckedness, with the powers of evil, he whispers, listen, baby, whoa, maybe this is just nature. Maybe this is just the way things are. Just so. It's all nature. Nature! Not God in the world. When we have a hard time seeing Hashem in front of us, there stands Amalek, unable to tolerate the fact that even when it seems hopeless, even when it seems that this world is ruled by violence, the Jews remain faithful. It's a faith beyond reason and explanation. And he himself, the Jew, can't even explain it, but he believes it. And this is the stubbornness of faith, Rabbi Cook explains, which stems from the deepest root and foundation of a Jew, the stiff-necked people in the positive sense. And the battle with Amalek is an eternal battle of faith versus doubt. It's a battle of forces, a battle of Hashem against Amalek in every generation. And it's the godly people who carry Hashem's light in the world versus those who come in the name of doubt and weakness of faith. And this battle continues all the while that Amalek is extant in any form in this world, and as long as its progeny, seeds of doubt and cold-heartedness which are sowed in the world, as long as they still remain in the heart of Israel, Amalek is thriving. And Amalek doesn't hate the Jew for a reason, but for what he is. And Amalek wants to rip HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, B'Tzidkihi, out of this world. But since he can't do that, he goes for God's representatives. You know what it's like? Sometimes a kid gets into a funk and starts to feel the world closing in on him, this child, and he starts to entertain doubts. Are my parents really my parents? Was I adopted? I feel so out of place. And he gets crazy and builds all sorts of elaborate theories that further fuel his fears. Open up your heart in the deepest way. That is how Amalek makes us have doubts. Maybe Hashem's not really our father. Maybe I'm imagining the whole thing. Amalek never has any basis. He doesn't need any basis. And so too, there's no basis for that feeling, other than the fact that we live in a world surrounded by chaos. But it's a deliberate chaos. And when we succumb to Amalek's doubt, then our first fruits are only a bunch of fruit. The world is without God's direction, and there opens before us the gaping maw of the world vision, of the admonitions for falling away from Hashem, which Moshe shares with us in this portion. The direct result of not banishing Amalek from our world, from our land, from our own hearts, forgetting our connection to Hashem, the direct result of that is Amalek's win. And when we ultimately blot out the memory of Amalek, we are in fact blotting out the forgetfulness of God in our world. Remembering God in our world and in our lives is the very essence of the Holy Temple. And there can be no forgetfulness of God in a world in which the Holy Temple stands, where I bring my first fruits and I declare simply and joyfully, thank you, Hashem, for everything you have given me. For what you have given me is everything that I need.